So, what did toxic mold feel like to me? My name is Lydia, and I had toxic mold for 3 years. I lived in a house that gave me toxic mold. Gave me and my mom toxic mold, actually. And what it felt like being in there and getting the sickness. Well, for me, it started out with me kind of just vaguely feeling more fatigued than usual, which I grew up having adrenal issues, unknown, but different adrenal problems that cause like fatigue and cause cortisol dysfunction and all of this sort of thing. So fatigue was kind of normal for me at that time, but I had felt a little bit more fatigued, which wasn't super unusual, but it just lingered on for a very long time. And I think the brain fog really sort of came on slowly. And so when brain fog and fatigue together come on very slowly, it's kind of difficult because it takes away this critical thinking, and things that you were able to concretely think about yesterday, you are no longer able to think about today. And because it creeps in so slow, it's like you're losing your ability to function normally, moment by moment, without you even realizing it, really. And so that had been happening, creeping up a little bit. And I think what kind of made it worse a little bit is just the fact that previously, before that, I had been experiencing depression, and I was in a bad depressive state. And so the fatigue and the brain fog just sort of gradually coming in didn't send off any alarm bells to me at the time, and they were just sort of happening. And I think it only started to become like a warning to me, or I guess something to be concerned about, when I was starting to feel the flu-like symptoms, which are often associated with toxic mold. Like when my bones started to feel quite achy, that was when I think it really started to dawn on me. But I think I was thinking in my head that I was just getting some sort of maybe flu, or that my immune system was feeling quite run down. I wasn't really quite sure, and it was just sort of lingering. And then as I was going into the doctors and trying to figure out why I was experiencing this, I guess I was very fortunate because my mom was also experiencing the same thing at the same time. And, our doctor was able to sort of look at just the fact that we were mirroring symptoms and come to a conclusion that it was toxic mold. And then when we would make our visits in, I would say we were going in maybe once or twice a month. We were both like gaining weight severely through those moments, and that was starting to become a very big red flag to her. But really, it was this weird, like, almost like something was happening to me, but I really wasn't sure what. Up until that point, it felt like my health was declining, but I really wasn't sure in what way. And even the brain fog kind of prevented me from critically thinking or pinpointing what was the cause or what was harming me. And really even having a hard time figuring out what I was even experiencing. It just sort of felt like, oh, I feel really crummy and I really can't pinpoint why or what. And then with the weight gain coming on and then the body aches progressively, it sort of felt like this storm just gradually rolling in. And, the cloud darkens and you don't really know when the next sign of light is going to be. And it was like an all-encompassing experience. Like a train that just could not be stopped. And it affected every single part of our lives, both of our lives, but in my life it was, okay, I'm back. But it became all-encompassing pretty quickly. And we would both be able to notice our decline. Like, my favorite pastime is hiking, and I was able to notice my decline based on how far I was able to hike, or how far, I was able to even walk downstairs at some point. Walking a few feet was excruciating and took everything in my power. It got really, really bad. And so over the course of, those 3 years, after month, I was able to, when I would make it out to a trail, I would maybe be able to do like a half a mile, and then quarter, and then none, and I would specifically go to trails or places that were outside that I knew had just a bench that outlooked a view, or maybe some steps that I could sit on, but not go all the way down. It became crippling, and my entire body would ache, and it was, at my worst, it was really hard to get up to do anything. Feed myself, go to the bathroom. Taking a shower was a massive challenge. It always ended and began in tears, full-blown tears. It was horrific. And yeah, it is like this storm that comes on very slowly and happens before you know it. And that's not to scare anybody, because we can heal. I, for the longest time, was convinced that there is no way to heal. It was very scary to think that and to go down that spiral, but there are ways of healing, and sometimes the groups use these scare tactics, but there are ways, and you have to remove yourself from it. Try different ways to remove yourself from it and detox. I recommend bentonite clay, but some people use charcoal, activated charcoal. But anyway, I have a Facebook page, Healing from Toxic Mold, And I have a Google Doc that I've written out that I send to people. So if you follow my Facebook page, Healing from Toxic Mold, and send me a direct message, I will literally send you all of that if you want to know exactly what I've tried and what I've researched. But that's kind of how it felt. It was this storm rolling in. And before I knew it, it took everything away. And I had looked vastly different. I had gained 100 pounds strictly due to toxic mold exposure. And I looked vastly different, and I felt vastly different than I ever had before. And because of the brain fog, it's interesting because, like, you're experiencing a night and day sort of shift from your former ways, your former self. At least for me, I felt that major shift, but at the same time, I would convince myself, like, am I really sick? Even though the proof is there, the proof is all around. But the brain fog makes it hard to critically think. And it's made so much worse if you don't have a supportive group of people around you who are thinking critically. Because toxic mold doesn't affect everybody. It's hard for me to really believe that, but that's what they say. They say that it doesn't affect everybody, that there's some people who have, even if you're in the same family, there are some people in your family who can have a certain gene that's affected and some people won't. It is so hard for me to fathom that sometimes, though, because how can one person experience something so severe, so crippling, so devastating, and another person could be standing right by them and live a functional, normal life? But that was what I had seen and witnessed. But when you live with somebody who isn't going through it, who doesn't believe you, who doesn't believe in it really, who's very dismissive and doesn't really, I guess, buy into the symptoms, that can be really hard, because your own mental state is a state of confusion during that time, or at least that's how the brain fog really affected me. It was this whole, like, state of confusion, not really understanding what I was going through, and it's like you need these people on the outside who can concretely tell you and sort of ground you in reality, because you're just sort of floating and you're not really understanding what's real, what's fake, sometimes highly dissociative. And it really helps having one person who can ground you and sort of go, no, this is drastically different than you were before, or this is the change that I am seeing, reminding you of what the doctor has even told you, or reminding you of the drastic changes that are before you. Like, I had gained 100 pounds and in a very short amount of time, and I had photos from before, and people could see me after, or during it, and somehow still they couldn't connect that I was sick. Somehow they were still in this, like, denial, or sort of this dismissive state of being, or this uncompassionate state of being. And it's really such a shame, in a way, that a lot of us people who've gone through toxic mold go through that, and as hard as it is going through it, I think ultimately what that does is shows us who is really there for us, and who is a tried and true friend or tried and true family, even. Because when we're at our worst of our worst and we're experiencing these symptoms, even though they feel sometimes so vague, they're very real. They're affecting us severely. And even now separating myself from toxic mold and looking on the outside, being healed, being so much better, I'm able to look back at that and go, wow, that was actually quite extreme. I always had allergies through it as well. I was always having a stuffy nose, itchy eyes. My immune system was plummeted to the ground. My cortisol levels were plummeted as well. But all of these symptoms together at the time felt so vague, but now looking back, I'm like, they were not vague. They were very obvious. Well, I guess when you're going through them and the brain fog is so severe and the fatigue is so severe and they don't stop and they don't go away, you don't have these moments of clarity, really. Like, how could you really see them for what they are? The only times where I was able to actually think and see a little clearer, it was like a little break in the storm clouds, was grounding outside in nature, or at least being outside in nature did help a lot. Like in winter when you can't really ground, being outside, that really helped. Breathing in that fresh air, bringing you back to reality, stepping outside of the moldy environment, that helped significantly. And the benefits of grounding, taking down the inflammation in your body, helps immensely. Or helps, is immensely a word? I'm not sure. And so that was one of my saving graces during that time. But now looking back, being clear-minded, I'm able to see just how bad it was and just how deeply it affected me. Even my memory was so sharp before, and my memory is next to nothing in comparison now, although much better than it was in toxic mold. But I used to have an extremely sharp memory, and I used to not pride myself on it where I would boast, but I took I took a lot of pride in that. And it hasn't been the same. Maybe if I started to take, I think it's saffron. Is it saffron that helps memory? I'll have to look more into that, but I'm very interested in sharpening that back up again. But it's things like that even when you're outside of toxic mold, you're able to see just the wreckage, the aftermath that has destroyed. And I would get headaches throughout toxic mold. There's a lot of symptoms that came with it, but it felt like a storm, a dense storm. Well, is that what your experience is? If you have dealt with toxic mold, is that your experience of what it felt like? And if it's not, and you've experienced something else, maybe a different type of imagery comes to mind when you think of your time in toxic mold, let me know, because it was also a tornado in a way, an absolute tornado. But yeah, I would love to hear what imagery comes to your mind when you look back at your time in toxic mold, or if you're in it right now, what does it feel like? What does it look like to you? Bye-bye.